Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson we're going to cover the 21st chapter in the book of Luke, the first 19 verses. We're going to divide it in half, but before we do that, we just want to briefly review what takes place in the 20th chapter. In the opening scene, he is in the temple, he being Yahshua, the protagonist of the gospel, and he answers a question with a question of his own. The question pertains to his authority, and he answers it with a question. The baptism of John, was it of the heavens or from men? And the men do not know how to answer. They huddle amongst and between themselves, and they come up with blanks and say, you do not know. And he says, neither do I tell you where my authority comes from. Then he gives the parable of the vineyard owner who sends servants in succession. These are analogous to the prophets. The vineyard owner is Yahweh, and finally and these bandits keep robbing them and beating them and fleecing them, and they finally kill some of the servants. Persecution and martyrdom was the price that a lot of the prophets paid. He sent his son. He thought they'd have respect for him, but they killed him too, and that is his resurrection pending. He is in the final week of his life, and then he entertains a question and a controversy of pertaining to the taxes to Rome. This and the forces which are aligned against him are the are the Herodians and the Pharisees. So the Pharisee in the other accounts. So Pharisees were anti-Roman, Herodians were pro-Roman. Herod owed his position to Rome. He was a Roman lackey, but they were determined to trap him according to some doubtful utterance to reproach, according to which they could indict him and execute him as a violator or offender in their own or Roman law. So if they could get him to say, don't pay your taxes to Rome, they would have their pretext for dragging him in. But he satisfies the question by saying it belongs to Caesar. It has its inscription on. Their government is legitimate, but it is limited. So it has a legitimate function. The dispensation of government is a testament to its necessity. And the one we're going to review in slightly greater detail is the final question that he answers in the temple. This one asked by the Sadducees, who in the 27th verse we read, deny that there is a resurrection, came to him and asked him. The Sadducees were the wealthy, the aristocratic, the liberal, the cosmopolitan, the appeasers who sat in the temple and controlled the temple. And they abided by the first 5 books of Moses, and he ultimately settles the question of the resurrection with the citation of that book. But the question that they ask him is that a man or a woman marries a man whose brothers die, 7 of them in succession. She remains married to each one according to a law that was written by Moses, and then they want to know whose wife she's going to be at the resurrection, having been married to all 7 brothers. And this is not an honest question because they don't even believe in the resurrection to begin with. And he answers with information that is useful to us who do believe in the resurrection. And Yahshua answering said to them, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are counted worthy of attaining that age and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are they given in married. For neither is it possible for them to die anymore, because they are like angels and are sons of Elohim, being sons of the resurrection. So to be counted worthy of the exalted station that awaits us, we are not worthy in ourselves. Nevertheless, he deems us worthy in spite of us. And if we are fortunate enough to make it there, we will live for eternity. Hence, the need to procreate and reproduce will not be there, because we will be there for all time. So that's going to come to an end. It's going to be an altogether different experiential thing than the carnal, corporeal world as we now know it and experience it in our bodies of flesh. And verse 39, and some of the scribes answering said, Teacher, you have spoken well, and they dared not question him anymore. In between that, he quotes Exodus 3:6 and says that he is the Elohim of the dead, not of the dead, but of the living. In other words, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are living in his presence. They are resurrected. So the scribes affirm the soundness of his, they consent to his victory, and they surrender. They dared not question him anymore. So he had silenced them and he had got their approval. But in between, what we're going to close on today in the preamble is he gives within earshot of all. He sends a heads up and to watch out for the same people who praised him. In between, he answers a question pertaining to the son of David, just the confusion about being son and master. But verse 45, and in the hearing of all the people, he said to his disciples. So he's talking to his disciples, but loud enough for everyone in the adjacent territory to hear. Beware of the scribes who like to walk in long robes and love greetings in the marketplaces and the best seats in the congregations and the best places at feasts, who devour widow houses and for a show make long prayers. They shall receive greater judgment. Everything in the world is not always what it seems. Often the most respected, the most adulated are the most rotten. So, they get all the perks and the prestige and the privilege and the red carpets everywhere they go. But when they're back and it's all said and done, they are devouring widows, who is the female figure who introduces the 21st chapter of Luke. We meet another widow of hers. Luke mentions the word widow more than all the other Gospels combined. They're the most vulnerable of society. They were bereft of a male protector. But they compensated for it by putting public parades of making long, elaborate, eloquent prayers, perhaps. But it was all for show. They neglected the weightier matters of the law, and the punishment and the wrath was rightfully reserved unto them. First verse, 21st chapter. And looking up, he saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury, and he saw a certain poor widow put in 2 small coins. The rich, they give out of their abundance. They give because they have. This widow was certainly in the have-not, so there is that dichotomy between rich people parting their way, probably spending, clearly have more to give, but this poor widow, she was impoverished and she was a widow, so she had really no means of income or livelihood, and to sacrifice even that small amount, it was not the portion of her giving, but the proportion. So she gave all she had and then some, where the rich, they were just casual. They were walking by, treating it trivially, but not giving their all, and just giving, with the wrong spirit, But this woman was an act of devotion. It was an act of love, of sacrificial love. When you love something, you will sacrifice for it, be it finances, and you have to love the church if you want, and like you love your wife. And he said, truly I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all, even though the amount she put in was 2 small coins. This would have been 1/64th of a drachma, which would have been the day's wage. So this was a infinitesimal amount. It was minuscule, but it was all she had, and it was an act of faith, and it was an act of devotion. So she gave more out of what she had, and they gave a fraction out of what they had, even though the sum of their giving exceeded hers. She gave more than them because it's on the system of proportion, not portion. For all these out of their excess have put in offerings for Elohim, but she out of her poverty has put in all that she had to live on. So the affluent and the abundant and the blessed and the prosperous, they're walking about to and fro. They think they're doing the right thing, their good deed. They have money to spare. They don't think anything of it. They're certainly not doing a bad deed, but they're not necessarily doing a good deed either if they're just going through the motions. Well, this one, we can just imagine her old, maybe physically disabled, decrepit widow walking about to and fro with a hunchback just to put in these 2 small coins. That was everything she had to live on, so she gave all. She gave all that she had, even though the all wasn't much, it was still all. And her ability to give everything was recognized by the master in plain company of the disciples who were present. And as some were speaking about the temple, that it was adorned with pleasant stones and gifts, he said, the temple was a sight and spectacle to behold, especially after the additions and the elaborations of Herod the Great, the monarch who sat on the throne in the year that Yahshua was born and died the very year. But he did a lot of things for the Jewish temple. Now, according to the writings of Josephus, it would have been white, except where it was overlaid with gold. So when the sun hit the temple, it had the appearance, being on Mount Zion, of being a mountain that would melt in snow. That's what it looked like. So it truly was a sight to behold, and a jewel of a prize. It was an aesthetically pleasing building. It was a magnificent building. It is no longer. It is at dust and ashes. Not a single stone would be left. So all that we see in the world will not last forever. And that is, monuments, historical monuments come and go. And it's almost frightening to think of all that we have lost in the sands of time, of civilization, how much richer we could be if we had preserved some of that civilization. And as some were speaking about the temple, that it was adorned with pleasant stones and gifts, he said, "These that you see, the days are coming in which not one stone shall be left upon another that shall not be thrown down. Everything you see, this stable structure, this resplendent jewel of an eye, will be dust and ashes. There will be nothing left. Not a single stone will be on top of one another by the time the Romans raise it to the ground." The reason they did that was because the zealot, the spirit of the zealot overcame and overwhelmed Palestine, and they launched a rebellion against their Roman masters in the year 66, and in the year 70 it was brutally suppressed and quashed by the future emperor, but then emperor's son Titus, who sacked the city of Jerusalem, razed it to the ground, and burned the temple, and that the temple has never been since. So they were looking at it now, and they thought it would be there forever, but many of them would live to witness the temple be no more, go extinct, just like he said. So they had the witness of his prophet, the immediate fulfillment of his prophecy. And they asked him, saying, "Teacher, but when shall this be? And when is the sign when this is about to take place?" They want to know something sure that they can behold, something they can rely on and count on to know that what is going to come to happen will take place. So a sign is something that preempts it. It leads up to it. It is a sign from heaven. It is a sign of providence. It is a sign from the fingerprint of God working his wonders in human sight. But the question when, now the mystery of the when, they thought the when could be not too far distant from the fulfillment, because he speaks of two things. He speaks of the return, his second coming, the return of the Son of Man, and also he already spoke of the temple, which is, so he's on the discourse he answers here is on a whole different topic. They're probably asking about the temple, which they did witness in 70 A.D. He's talking about something that has a prophetic echo. So it is alive for the present audience and also the end time audience, the one we are getting there. And one of the things I encourage people to do is look for the echo in prophecy. And this is all underlined, written in red. This is all his words beginning now, and we're going to take this up to the 19th verse. Verse 8, "And he said, See that you are not led astray, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am, and the time is near. Then do not go after them." False messiahs were present and prolific in the time leading up to the Zealot rebellion and the sack of Jerusalem. The writings of Josephus attest to this. So the disciples would have witnessed many messianic pretenders, and a lot of them just their plots were vanquished. And we read of some of them in the 5th chapter of Acts. These were before they became slightly more prolific, but in the end times there are going to be plural false messiahs, men claiming to be him who are not, and plural false prophets in Matthew's account, but he only makes mention of the false messiahs here. But the false prophets, their message is the time is near, and there have been people throughout the ages, cult leaders, who have said that the time is near. It was big in the year 1843, and also the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm not sure if that's the title, but they are the polygamist in the mountains. The former president, who is now incarcerated, I believe, for life, his father was believed to be the prophet under whom the one they call Jesus Christ would return. But he died, so that never came to, and the son is in jail. But let's return to the text. But when you hear of fightings and unrest, do not be alarmed, for these have to take place first, but the end is not immediately. I guess false prophets, they are false prophets in the Mormon church. But hear of fightings, wars, and unrest, geopolitical turmoil, geopolitical chaos. He's telling these things so that they will not be excited or caught off guard when it happens. So the wars and rumors of war, unrest means just base level discontentment, dissatisfaction, the soil upon which revolution activity, radical activity, criminal activity takes place with on the street. There's a sense of despair about the times of the end, and but these things have to come to pass, and we have to bite the bullet when they get here and just take it in stride. Then he said, nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. So in accompanying the war chessboard, there's going to be a turmoil and a balance of power, shaking of the balance of power struggle. It's been pretty stable post World War II, but after the age of America is the age of the anti-Messiah, I'm convinced. So we can look at this in any number of which ways. Now, nations rising against nations is a natural development. It's been true since every age, and there are really not a whole lot of kingdoms left on the earth that are ruled by kings, but that terminology, is still not inaccurate. And there shall be great earthquakes in various places, and famines of food, and deadly diseases, and there shall be terrors and great signs in the heavens, and there shall be great tempest. Earthquakes, I believe the number of them that have erupted since the year 1700 is just an explosion of earthquake activity. There was not a whole lot of these things before then, so the accelerated pace is one of the birth pangs that the end times is near. And famine and deadly diseases, the temptation to sell the talk of terror at the filming of this, which is the coronavirus, as one of these deadly diseases, is, I'm not going to rule that out, but I'm not going to go there either. But the terrorism, we are in the war on terror. Terror is a fact of life. Terror is to redefine the nature of warfare. It actually made the acquirement of nuclear superiority obsolete. It wiggled its way around that and completely redefined the nature of warfare. But all these great signs, these heavenly signs and great tempests, these great turmoils, these great upheavals are in the pawns in the hand of providence that are unfolding into the ultimate manifestation of the promise. So everything remains in the control of the sovereign control of the hand of the Almighty, start to finish. But before all this, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you and deliver you up to the synagogues and prisons and be brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. So he's speaking to the original disciples, certainly with synagogues. Now that was where, in addition to being a center for worship, scholarship, education, and learning, it was also a place where you could spend the night in jail, so to speak. So that is why they were not in synagogues to worship when they were being laid their hands up and tossed into these synagogues and prisons, and they were in the synagogue as a holding cell, and then eventually they probably went to prison, and then they were dragged before rulers and sovereigns and kings, and they would have the opportunity to bear testimony and witness when they are dragged before them. Why are you here? and the answer to why they are being persecuted is because it must come to pass. It's part of providence. You can't resist it when it gets here. So this also speaks of an end-time persecution when we will be summoned before, we the present-day living disciples, when it gets here, will be summoned before rulers and authorities to give witness for his name's sake. And it shall turn out to you for a witness. So this is an opportunity. I know it's not pleasant. I know it's painful. Certainly not. You don't want to be dragged there after being seized by arms and tossed in prison and then dragged in handcuffs to plead for clemency while giving a witness. That's just... but it is a witness, it is an evangelical opportunity, and they are prepared for it. It is necessary. All the dragging through prison is necessary so that the rulers can have a witness of the one that they can embrace or resist and continue to rebel against. Therefore, resolve in your hearts not to premeditate on what you answer. So he's telling them when they get there, take no thought. It's human nature. Preparation alleviates nervousness, certainly with public speaking. If you get up there, you want to know what you're saying, and you want to be prepared to say what you say, and just in the process of preparation will alleviate any nervousness that you have being up there. You will be prepared for it. But he's telling them not to prepare for anything, to just walk in there, whistle, go about your business, send a prayer or two for me. But when the moment comes and when it arrives, what's interesting here is it's not the Spirit who does it, but he himself who does it, perhaps through his Spirit. For I shall give you a mouth and wisdom which all your adversaries shall not be able to refute or resist. This was written of Stephen in Acts, the 6th chapter. They tried to refute and resist him, but he spoke through the power of the Spirit, and that was an irresistible force and an immovable object all in one. But the mouth which is going to know what to say and to be wise above everyone who's aligned and against and opposed all around us, our enemies, we're going to be smarter than them. We're going to have the wisdom that comes from him, who is the wisdom of the world, and he will say what he tells us to say. He will move our mouth and not we ourselves, and it's going to be an invincible force speaking through us. And you shall also be betrayed by parents and brothers and relatives and friends, and some of you shall be put to death. Some will be called to pay the price of martyrdom. This is true in any age of Christianity. Christians are being slaughtered all across the world as we speak. In Nigeria, they are on the run. And, the countless places where Christianity is a danger, but it's going to get a lot worse in the pre-tribulation persecution. That is what he speaks of here. So this is before all the ultimate persecution. This is a pre-tribulation persecution that is near the end times, but not quite the same thing as Revelation. But the division does come into the family. It comes into the home. The sword of division divides the brother from the father, and the mother-in-law from this daughter-in-law, and every other imaginable arrangement between family members. So there is a division, and this is a source of there is a divide about us. It does separate friends, and it does kill soldiers, martyrs, witnesses. Martyr is the Greek word for witness. And you shall be hated by all because of my name. So they're not going to hate us because of ourselves. They're going to hate us because we bear his name. We advance his cause. We are his soldiers. We are his disciples. We have targets on our head. We have a bullseye target for Satan in the world, and he is the arch hater. So we have Bible haters, God haters. There's a lot of hatred and hostility against us in the world, and we're trying to save it, but they don't want us there. We are, you don't have to travel too far outside your comfort zone as a Christian, to be hated. It's just part of the world, and if we are walking in the Word and abiding in the way, then we will be hated because of his namesake and not our own. That is the difference. A lot of victim mentality, the artificial victim mentality that is so fashionable in our overeducated society, is a lot of Christians think that they are being persecuted because they are Christian, but a lot of times it's just because they're jerks. They're not fighting for principles or anything. So there is a difference, and we do want to honor it. But not a hair of your head shall be lost at all. This does not mean that your physical hair will necessarily be restored, although I'd certainly like that. But it does mean that his protection, his shield is total, his guard is absolute. So he has us from the womb to the tomb, from the head to the toe. Nothing we're not going to have any eternal injury or deformity or anything lost from us as we know it. Possess your lives by your endurance. So if you want to have your lives and have it forever after, you have to endure to the end. He who endures to the end, the same shall be saved, is perhaps the more familiar translation of this. There's a similar version in Mark 13:13, although he does say something before that. But endurance is key. Endurance is critical. Without endurance, there is no salvation. There is no faith worth speaking of, unless it has endured and is enduring. But the life that we're after is we have to be willing to lay down, if necessary, our life in order to attain it, because as the paradox presents itself, he who values his life will lose it, and he who loses his life shall gain it. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.